A man in 1950s America goes to therapy because he feels deeply, romantically in love with another man. His therapist diagnoses him with a mental disorder, prescribes treatment, tries to fix him. By today's standards, that therapist was the one with the problem. So here's the question that should genuinely unsettle you: who decides what's abnormal? And what if they're wrong right now, about something we all just accept? Because they've been wrong before. More than once. Psychologists have been wrestling with this question for over a century. And what they landed on isn't a simple definition, it's a framework for specific markers called the 4Ds. And here's the thread I want you to hold the entire time we're talking: the same framework that helps us identify real suffering is the exact same framework that, in the wrong hands, has been used to pathologize people who were never sick at all. That's what we're pulling on today. Deviance. The first D is deviance. It means the behavior falls outside what's considered typical or acceptable in a given culture or time period. Hearing voices other people can't hear is considered deviant in most Western clinical settings. It's uncommon. It alarms people. But here's the thing that genuinely wrecked me when I first learned this: in certain indigenous cultures, hearing the voices of ancestors isn't a symptom. It's a spiritual connection. It's honored. The same experience. Completely opposite meaning. Which means deviance, on its own, tells us almost nothing. It only tells us what the people doing the measuring consider normal. And that's worth keeping in mind the entire time we're talking about this. Distress. Second D, distress. Is the behavior causing the person genuine, sustained suffering? Here's an image I want you to hold. Think about grief after losing someone close. The kind that wakes you up at 4 a.m. The kind that makes food taste like nothing. In the weeks after a real loss, that pain isn't abnormal, it's human. It's your mind honoring something real. Now imagine that same feeling arrives every single morning with no cause you can name and no event to explain it. You wake up already exhausted. Already carrying something heavy that you can't set down and can't describe to anyone who hasn't felt it. That's distress. Not sadness, whether you live inside of. And it matters because it keeps the focus on what the person is actually experiencing, not on how they appear to everyone else. Dysfunction. Third D, dysfunction. Is the behavior actively dismantling someone's ability to live their actual life? Washing your hands after using the bathroom is healthy. But someone with severe OCD might wash their hands 80 times a day, not because they want to, but because their brain will not release the alarm until they do. Their skin cracks and bleeds. They're late to everything. They're exhausted and ashamed and still can't stop. That's not a quirk. Dysfunction is when the behavior stops being something you do and becomes something that does you. Danger. And the fourth D, danger. Danger means the behavior creates real risk of harm to the person themselves or to others. But I want to show you what this actually looks like underneath the surface. Picture a teenager who starts skipping school, then stops eating regularly, then cancels on every friend, then stops sleeping. Every one of those steps was distress. Every one was dysfunction. And nobody caught it, or maybe they noticed, but didn't know what to do. Didn't have the language. Didn't want to make it bigger than it was. And then one night something happens that finally looks like danger, and suddenly everyone's asking how it got this far. Danger is almost never the beginning. It's what happens when distress goes unheard long enough. That's not a comfortable thought. But it's the one that makes the whole framework actually matter. what this looks like in real life. Now let's look at what this actually looks like day to day. And as we go, I want you to track two things where the 4Ds are doing honest work, pointing toward real suffering that deserves real help. And where, historically, that same framework got aimed somewhere else entirely. Type 1, anxiety and OCD-related behavior. The most common category and the most consistently underestimated, because everyone experiences anxiety. So it's easy to assume it can't be that serious. Clinical anxiety isn't nervousness before something high stakes. It's your brain's threat detection system misfiring full alarm signals with no fire, no reason, no off switch. And the dysfunction builds quietly, avoidance that starts as one skipped event and slowly shrinks your world until you're living in a smaller and smaller version of the life you wanted. And the distress compounds that you're not just scared, you're exhausted by being scared, and ashamed of being exhausted, and somewhere underneath all of it, afraid that this is just who you are now. This is where the 4Ds function the way they're supposed to, pointing clearly toward genuine suffering that responds well to treatment. Clean, honest application of the framework. Type 2, mood-related behavior. Then mood depression and bipolar disorder, and this is where the history gets more complicated. Clinical depression isn't sadness. It's flatness. Disconnection. The part of your brain that generates motivation, anticipation, pleasure, it goes quiet. People describe it as living behind glass. Everything is visible. Nothing touches you. That's not a mood. That's a neurological event. Bipolar disorder adds another layer, episodes of mania where someone feels invincible, barely sleeps, makes enormous decisions that unravel for months. Then crashes into depression so severe it barely resembles the same person. Now here's the uncomfortable edge of this category. For most of Western history, women who expressed significant distress, not delusional, not dysfunctional, just distressed and vocal about it, were routinely labeled hysterical, unstable, disordered. The suffering was genuine. But the dysfunction, in many cases, was being created by the conditions they were living inside. The framework got aimed at them anyway because examining the conditions was less convenient than diagnosing the person. The 4Ds were there. The agenda was also there. Type 3, trauma-based behavior. And then there's trauma. PTSD. Trauma-based behavior is not weakness. It's not someone being unable to move on. It's a nervous system that experienced something genuinely overwhelming and in an act of pure protection never fully came back from it. Flashbacks. Hypervigilance. Being startled by a sound in your body, going fully back to the moment it happened, even years later, even somewhere completely safe. The brain in these cases isn't broken. It learned. It learned the world was dangerous, and it's doing its job at the wrong time, in the wrong place, with no off switch. The distress is unambiguous. The dysfunction is real. Support matters. Treatment matters. But notice what this category cost people historically: veterans told to toughen up. Abuse survivors told they were making it up. The suffering was there the entire time. The framework was simply ignored because the people's suffering were inconvenient to acknowledge. Let's go back to that man from the beginning. Run the 4Ds on him honestly. Was his behavior deviant? Only by the standards of a specific era. Distress? Yes, but created entirely by how society responded to who he was, not by anything internal. Dysfunction? Only because the system was built to punish him. Danger? Only to people who felt threatened by his existence. The framework was right there. Someone just pointed it in the wrong direction. And here's the line I keep coming back to: the difference between this person needs help and this person makes us uncomfortable has been blurred throughout history more times than we want to admit. Homosexuality was listed in the DSM as a mental disorder until 1973. Tripetomania, a fake 19th-century diagnosis, claimed that enslaved people who wanted their own freedom were suffering from a mental illness. Both times, the framework existed. Both times, someone used it as a weapon. This doesn't mean abnormal behavior isn't real. It is. Real suffering is real. The 4 Ds matter. Getting help matters. None of that changes. But who holds the framework is the problem. And that question, who decides, and what are they protecting when they decide, that's not something you ask once and answer. It's something you keep asking. About the field. About the culture. About yourself. Here's what I want to know from you. After everything we just walked through, the framework, the history, the places it's done its job, and the places it's been weaponized, is there something you've always thought of as just how you are that you're now wondering might actually be worth taking seriously? Or the other direction, something that got labeled or dismissed that finally makes more sense to you now? Drop it in the comments. You don't need details. Even just, yes, this shifted something, I read everything down there. That man from the beginning of this video sat in a therapist's office and was told something fundamental about him was wrong. He was not wrong. And what history keeps showing us consistently, across field after field, generation after generation, is that the people who got labeled, dismissed, and told they didn't fit were often simply living ahead of a world that hadn't caught up yet. Real suffering is real. The 4 Ds matter. Getting help matters. But the framework exists to find genuine suffering and address it with care. Not to shrink you into something easier to manage. You are not a category. You are a person navigating something real. And people with honest support, real information, and sometimes just the knowledge that someone else has mapped this territory before them. People find their way through. That's not a promise. It's a track record. If this made you think or feel something, the like button helps other people find it. And this is a video I think more people should probably stumble onto. Subscribe if you want to keep going. I'll see you in the next one.